Thank you very much for being a part of iRadio on social media and also on our other platforms as well. My name is Emmanuel Joseph Akilin. I'm the host of the Dawn program. We are right here inside the office of Honorable Michael Makuei, the Minister of Information, Telecommunication and Postal Services, and he is also the government spokesperson. It has been a while, Honorable Minister, and it's our pleasure to be in your office today to have a conversation.
Yeah, thank you very much, Brother Emmanuel, and welcome to the iRadio. This is your office, and you are all the time welcome. It is true you have stayed for long. We have without seeing one another, so you are most welcome.
Yes, thank you. Now, what is important in our interest to have this conversation with you is to talk about domestic politics. Not about the region and not about the continent as well. We can touch that later on, but let's start with where we are now in the current peace implementation, the revitalized peace agreement, and we have unity government, 3 years almost now. And also tell us a little bit more about the roadmap, the status. Where are we from the 24-month extension, Honorable Makuei?
Okay, thank you very much. Of course, with our domestic politics, have no much to say, but let us talk about the peace agreement and the roadmap. The peace agreement, of course, was signed by the parties to the agreement, and we started its implementation since then up to now. We are implementing it in letter and spirit, and whatever obstacles that do face us, we are trying to overcome them in a way or the other. And one should admit here that yes, due to some other obstacles, that is why we could not meet the deadline, and this is what brought about the extension, or this is what brought about the roadmap. The peace agreement, of course, is a process. Implementation of the peace agreement is a process. This is why it was given that period. And when that period could not meet it, then we had to extend it for another period. So what we call now the roadmap is actually another extension. It is extension, and we have in the course of extension we had to review the dates, so that we can conform with the dates, and then and that will give us the time also to operationalize some of the provisions of the agreement which we did not implement. This will also give us the opportunity to prepare and start the implementation of some parts of the agreement which have not been done. Issues like the constitutional making process. Because there is no way we can talk of having implemented the agreement and going for elections as long as the agreement, as long as the constitution, the permanent constitution of the Republic of South Sudan, what brought about the extension, which is what brought about the roadmap, so that when we set up the constitutional making committee or commission, then it would start and we'll have ample time to draft, to make all the necessary consultations and draft the constitution for the people of South Sudan. They will have the time to seek the opinion of the people and so forth. Within that constitution, there are so many issues that will be addressed. One of them is the governance system, whether it will be federal or otherwise. We have already agreed in the agreement that there will be a federal system. But we have not agreed as to what type of federalism do we want. This is what we intend to do, and this is what we intend to address. And unless, for us to decide on the type of federalism we need, it needs studies to be conducted and so forth, so that we know all types of federalism, out of which we can choose what suits us.
You also can get experience from other countries.
Exactly, and this is what the Ministry of Federal Affairs is now doing. They are doing it, and probably by early June, there may be held a conference on federalism, whereby people from different countries will be invited to come and give us more lectures about the federal system in their countries. In addition to that, of course, we cannot be talking about, we cannot just keep quiet about the type of governance that we need in terms of whether it will be presidential or parliamentary. This has also to be decided, and this will be decided in the constitution. And in addition to that, there's number of seats in the parliament and so forth. These are issues that are simple and can be easily addressed. That is about for the agreement itself. We are moving very well. The security arrangements, which is now the one which is lagging behind, efforts are underway now to deploy the current forces which we have graduated. They will be deployed, and as soon as they are deployed, then we will receive the second, which is phase 2 of the security arrangements, will go to the training centers so that they are also trained and graduated before time. In terms of transitional justice, we are also working on that. We are working for the establishment of all the institutions which are supposed to be established. And this is, of course, a process, and as such, we are moving forward, and we are sure we'll be in a position to achieve all the objectives, implement the most important aspects of the agreement before the end of the transitional period. That is before we go for elections. Elections, of course, will electoral process will start from December 2023 to probably to April 2024. This is because this is the time when the electoral process will start with the registration and so forth up to the voting.
Yeah, and that means census is likely not to be considered here.
For census alone, for census to take place, it needs at least 2 years. And it needs a lot of preparations. So we are likely to come up with a mechanism whereby we can still decide on the number of constituencies that will be. Because originally the population census in terms of elections is only important because with the population census you will be in a position to determine the number of constituencies. If you say how many people, you can say how many people will be per constituency. Then you can divide it by the whole population, and you will be in a position now to allocate the constituencies according to the population.
So this time around, when you start the process of election, the electoral process in December 2023, how are you going to determine the number of constituencies, Honorable Minister?
Well, this is what will be determined in the constitutional making process. Yeah.
Talking about the deployment chapter 2 of the agreement, since you mentioned it, we understand we had this conversation several times, factors that are hindering the security arrangements in the agreement. But let's talk about the forces that have already been graduated. What is exactly really delaying their deployment, Honorable Minister? Because the people of South Sudan do believe their deployment will immediately help improve security situation in some parts of the country.
Well, there are so many factors that are actually hindering the implementation of Chapter 2. And say phase 1 of the agreement, as you might have, you know very well that I have ever been talking about the graduation of the forces with the sticks. The arms embargo is one obstacle, because with the arms embargo we will not be in a position to deploy these forces with arms. Because an army without, a soldier without a gun is not a soldier. He could be in uniform, okay, but if he doesn't have the gun, then he's not a soldier. And he will not be in a position to address all the security concerns and implement or perform his functions and duties as a soldier. So one of the major problems that is facing us is the arms embargo. With the arms embargo in place, we graduated the forces with the sticks, as you saw last time. And now the international community is on our neck, demanding that we deploy them. And we have been asking, appealing to the international community to lift the arms embargo so that we can get arms from good Samaritans for these forces which we have graduated. Unfortunately, we have not been receiving any response, so we are now in the process of deploying these forces. We'll deploy them, and then the international community will tell us as to how best will we make use of them as long as they are not armed. If they were armed, we'll graduate them, they will be in a position to use them for disarming the civil population. But if they go with the sticks, will they disarm an armed civil population? No, of course. So this is one of the main reasons that is actually hindering the deployment of these forces.
What are other reasons apart from
the other reason is that within the opposition forces that have now gone for training and are graduated, these forces were supposed to be organized. They were supposed to be organized according to the military formations. And for them to be organized, you need to know what is your force. And we know when you have a platoon, who commands a platoon, when you have a company, who commands a company, and so forth. So there was the parties had agreed for the formation at the higher echelon. And all these positions have already been filled. But in the middle and the lower echelons, the parties have not agreed up to now.
Why is that? What is the problem?
Because at this level, at the lower echelons, you are supposed to conform with the military formations. So if I have a force, it will be seen, that force, is it a platoon, is it a company? And then a commander of a company or a platoon is known and is put there. But with the forces that were in but with those opposition forces who have now been graduated, they had a lot of officers other than NCOs and men. And this is where the problem is now, because there is no way you can deploy a force which is not organized. And for us to organize it, it is the people responsible for their forces that will organize them, not any other person. It is after organizing them that they can now be unified. But unification without them being reorganized is not possible. This is one of the main obstacles that is actually hindering the deployment.
And how were they graduated if they are not
they were all graduated as NCOs.
NCOs.
As men.
No, okay.
Yeah.
And so how long is this process going to take now so that this can be expedited?
Well, this process, we are now in the process of obtaining logistics for the deployment of these forces. We will deploy them in this way. Those who will be going to the army will report to the army. Those who will going to the prisons, the police, fire brigade, national security, and so forth, all these forces will be deployed will be sent to their respective areas. Once this is addressed, the issue of command at the middle and the lower echelons. Once this issue of command is determined or is addressed, then all these forces will be unified and they will be deployed to their respective units. It is there in their respective units that people will think of what to do. Yes, because up to now we don't have any arms for arming them. Those who were in the SSPDF, they have their arms. But those who were not in the SSPDF, they don't have arms, and as such they cannot. Those who are in the SSPDF, they have their arms, but those who came left their arms in their homes and came in up to the training centers without arms. This is where the problem is now. Otherwise, if they were to come by then, we would have addressed the situation. But unfortunately, this is the situation in which we are.
And just to make this a little bit clear, when you said the parties disagreed, you're referring to the government, the IO, and the SOA on the process of deployment?
It is those parties that have the arms. It is not everybody. it is not everybody who is. It is not everybody who is a party to the agreement that I say in the security arrangements.
So which party is violating
it
this
is
process?
Those who are who have forces. That is SSPDF, IO, and SAWA.
So which party is violating this? Is disagree? Where is the problem coming from? From the three parties?
Problem is from these other parties. Parties to the agreement. Other parties. And by other parties, I mean the IO and the SAWA.
So
they have not organized their forces accordingly.
Yes. And when you talk about the logistics, you're procuring logistics for the deployment. What are you referring to here? You're talking about food and
about food and about mobility and so forth.
Yes.
We'll give them food, mobility. We send them to their respective
right.
units.
And Honorable Minister, talking about arms embargo, recently the UN panel of experts argued that the government violated the arms embargo by purchasing some military equipment. What is the position of the government on that statement?
I'm not aware of any violation which has been done. And by saying that they have purchased some military hardwares, I don't know what do they mean by military hardwares. And what I know is that the army bought some cars for mobility. And this, I don't know if the buying of cars is part of the items that have been included as covered as arms in the arms embargo, because it is only the arms and ammunitions that are prohibited. But for cars, for mobility of the army, unless they are saying that let the army walk on foot. Yes.
Right. And let's finish chapter 5. I understand the government is planning next week to hold, Honorable Minister, this conference on transitional justice, and it is going to be under the theme building a South Sudan model for transitional justice system. It's going to happen next week. Can you tell us something more about this?
Well, of course, chapter 5 talks about the transitional justice system. And in this way, of course, we have the Reparation and Compensation Commission, and we have the, what do you call it? We have the hybrid court, and then you have the CTRH. These are the mechanisms that are set up under Chapter 5. Now, under Chapter 5, we are going to talk about the CTRS and the reparation, compensation and reparation. For the hybrid court, of course, hybrid court has its own mechanisms. It has its own procedures that are usually followed, and it is connected with the African Union. So, unless the African Union brings us all the requirements, then we will not be in a position to move forward. So we are waiting for the African Union to tell us what to do. For the other two commissions, yes, we have already started the processes, and this is why we want to hold this conference to explain to the people. And we will also bring experts from other countries who would come and talk to us about this, how these commissions are set up and how they operate it, so that we benefit from the experience of others. This is what we are doing, and we have invited experts from different parts of the world who have had the same situation, so that they come and talk to us. Countries like South Africa, for example, like Rwanda, for example. These are the countries that had experience before on these things. And these are the countries that we are inviting their experts to come and talk to us about this, so that we see how best we can model it. Yes.
Honorable Minister, some diplomats and also civil society activists and partners to South Sudan, including RJMEC, they continue to reiterate this statement that the leaders are not serious, and there's
no political will.
There's no political will, and they're derailing the peace agreement, the implementation intentionally. We want to know the position of the unity government from you as the spokesperson, Honorable Minister.
Well, of course, those people are not realistic. I say they are not realistic because they don't put into consideration other issues that have ever been derailing the implementation of the agreement. One of them is this lack of insecurity, this insecurity which had been persistent all the time. Not this insecurity only, but even the implementation. There are those who think that the implementation of the agreement is an event. It is a process, and if it is a process, then definitely we need to know that yes, in the implementation there ought to be obstacles which need to be overcome. And all these obstacles at times they contribute in the delay of the implementation of the agreement. These are some of the things which they are not seeing. Even this arms embargo is an obstacle. Without the arms embargo, we would have graduated these forces sometimes back. But the graduation of forces, we kept it down, believing that the arms embargo may be lifted so that we acquire arms for these people.
They say there are enough arms in the hands of civilians.
Well, how do we get them from the civilians? Should we go to them and say, give them to us? No. You need a force to disarm them. And that force must be armed. So if we are graduating an armed force, should we send them to go and disarm armed civilians?
You mean the current force the government has cannot disarm the armed civilians?
That is not enough. That is not enough, because if you have to do the disarmament, you need to do it holistically. You need to have a holistic approach. Because if you say you are now in Central Equatoria, if we say let us start the disarmament in Central Equatoria, what will happen? The civil population which is armed will run to Eastern Equatoria and to Western Equatoria and to Lakes and to Jongule. They will take their arms that way. And then they come, when the army goes, oh, there are no arms. Now when we move to Jongule, they will run this way or that way or cross the river to Lakes. This is why it is important that the approach should be holistic, so that you don't give room for these civilians to move about with their fire.
So are you calling for lifting of arms embargo on South Sudan, Honorable
We
Minister?
are calling for the lifting of the arms embargo on South Sudan so that we can implement the agreement. Because this arms embargo is one of the major problems hindering the implementation of the agreement.
Yes, and Honorable Minister, about elections, we earlier dwelt a little bit about it. Can you tell the people of South Sudan, can you promise, can you confirm to the people of South Sudan that elections will really happen in December 2024 as the government spokesperson? And if yes, what about the prerequisites of the elections, especially for South Sudan to have permanent constitution before it goes for elections?
Well, permanent constitution, of course, is a process. We have already started it, and the former National Constitutional Review Commission had actually done a good job. They have collected enough material for the process. And it is a matter of within 1 year from now, we'll be in a position to have our constitution, unless the people decide not to have it. But our people, for the constitutional making process, it will take only 1 year to have it ready.
We're in May now.
Well, yes, we are in May now. We are in May. It is not difficult, because after all there are certain issues, certain provisions of the constitution that need to be, in which we need to consult the people. But there are certain permanent provisions of the constitution that are not untouchable. Like like the executive. When you talk about the executive, what you need to know is whether it will be parliamentary or presidential. When you go to the parliament, you need to know only how many seats will be in the parliament.
Based on the constituencies.
Based on the constituencies. All these are issues. Then you go to the Bill of Rights. Bill of Rights are untouchable. And then you go to the other commissions and to the states. These are so there is nothing new that will will emerge out of all this, except very few things. These very few things can be addressed, and after which the committee will sit down and come up with zero draft. The zero draft then will be subjected to study, and conference will be held and so forth. So it's not a difficult process.
And another issue, especially the SPLM-IO, including the first speaker of the parliament, Honorable Yet Nathaniel, who is also a senior member of the SPLM-IO, he previously raised concern that the country cannot go for elections if there is no civic space, if there is no freedom of expression in this country. What would you say on that as a comment, Honorable Minister?
Well, I can say these are plans of the IO to avoid elections, because when you talk of no freedom of express, as long as these freedoms are not there, then there is no going for elections. Then it means that they are not ready for elections. Otherwise, what freedom do you need? Because when we talk about freedom of freedom of expression, I think these freedoms are enshrined in the laws and in the Constitution.
And civic space.
For the civic space, it is open, except that people do not want to exploit it. The IO is now operating. Is it prohibited? No. But people have decided not to utilize that opportunity. They are waiting for the Political Parties Act, so that the parties are registered. IO is not registered. But it is operating. We have not stopped anybody from making use of the current situation up to the time when the law is out and you register. But there are people, I don't know how do they understand the freedom of press and freedom of expression and so forth. It doesn't mean that you step on the toes of others. Yeah, when you are exercising that right, it doesn't mean that you have the right to step on my toes.
The concern is that if you want to hold an event to bring people together to discuss issues of this country, this is as an enshrined, you mentioned in the Constitution. Why is it that you need to take permission from the national security, for instance?
You take permission for your own security. Yes, not because you are being prevented, and this is all over, by the way. It is not only in South Sudan. But you take permission, and it is known that you are doing a function, so that you are given the necessary protection.
Isn't it a work of the police, Honorable Minister, not the national security?
That is not a problem, because you are now talking about the old laws. But the new laws, it is the hands of the police.
Before you wind up, because we have like 10 minutes now, let me ask you about the issue of clearing of the Naham River and also the Lake No. And you know, it was a controversial discussion last year, and recently people saw on social media equipment and also some government officials in some states showing that the work is already ongoing. But from the perspective of the national government, where are we from that process so far? Where did we stop?
Well, of course, as you know very well, the issue of dredging had been a problem. Yeah. And we had so many discussions. And a high-level committee was set up to come up with all that was done. Yeah. And the high-level committee made a recommendation. It made a recommendation to the presidency, saying that they are not against the cleaning and clearing of the river. But they are against dredging. Anyway, that is not our problem. That's not my problem. I'm one of those who are for cleaning the river, irrespective whether you call it dredging, you call it cleaning and clearing. Whatever is the removal of all this, and you clear the river so that the water can flow smoothly. No, so at the end of the day, the government decided, okay, if the problem was the usage of the word dredging, then we are for cleaning and clearing. So what is being done now is cleaning and clearing of the river up to Lake No.
Yes, and do we know like how long will it take?
I don't know. This.
Right, and before you wind up, we would also love to know your there's fighting in the region, and this is also a concern to South Sudan, because the country is also somehow depending in terms of economy on Sudan, especially the oil proceeds, the pipeline, and also the relations between the two countries. And now we're seeing conflict happening in Sudan. We've seen also the efforts of President Salva Kiir and the government of South Sudan to try to mediate. But then how do you, in general, how do you look at this conflict right now happening in Sudan, and what role can really South Sudan play to ensure that there is peace in the Sudan, because it also means peace in South Sudan?
Yes, it is unfortunate, really, that Sudan went to war, and fighting up to now is still going on. It is still raging. Yeah. It is our wish that that Sudan is stable. It is our neighbor, and we have been living together all this time up to the time when we separated, and we are interrelated in a way or the other. So it is our wish and our call to the generals who are fighting to come to peace, come into terms and reach peace, so that the Sudanese go back to their homes, so that the Sudanese can go back to their normal way of living. The efforts of President Salva, I really appreciate them, because Salva, or the President of the Republic of South Sudan in the person of Salva Kiir, is the one who knows the problems of Sudan more than any other neighbor, because we have been together up to the time of separation. And even after separation, we have been together. Our relations have been cordial and good. So there's nothing that can prevent us from intervening at any time. In our, it is usually said, when the house of your brother is burning, go and quench off that fire, because it may extend to you at any time. This is the other part which is our concern. We don't want this fighting to spill over to us here. We want it addressed and finished there, so that people can live in peace and harmony. The efforts of President Salva, who was actually nominated by the heads of states of IGAD to lead the peace process, himself and the President of Kenya and the President of Djibouti, they were supposed to come up with a mechanism, and then they addressed the issue. But it seems that they had gone to Saudi Arabia by the initiative from the Americans and the Saudis. They are there now, but this, nevertheless, we cannot give up. President Salva will not give up and say, well, these people have gone there, I'm no longer, his president is still pressing on the parties to the agreement, to the two warring factions, so that they can come together, understand themselves, and be in peace. The initiative is good, and we support it. The African Union and the IGAD initiative is one and the same, and hopefully they will be in a position to bring peace to the Sudan.
Right, and what would you think? God forbid this is not what we are wishing, but what don't you think it's time for South Sudan to start having Plan B, especially on the economy, relying fully on the oil pipeline being used through Sudan? God forbid, but what plan can the government really have in the future? Don't you think it's time for the government to think otherwise?
Well, of course, I quite agree with you. In fact, we should have learned from the first event when President Bashir was overthrown, and we had that situation. We should have thought of any other alternative means of evacuating the crude oil, or else we operationalize our refineries so that we can refine them and export the finished goods. This has repeated itself again, and we are praying that we are not affected. We are praying that our pipeline continues as it is, and up to now, thank God, nothing has happened to the pipeline. The oil is flowing, And of course, once the pipeline is affected, it affects all of us, including Sudan, because Sudan is benefiting out of the flow of the oil in their pipelines, because we are paying for the pipeline, we are paying for the facility, and we are paying for the processing of the crude before it goes to the pipeline. All this is a reliable income to the government of Sudan. So we are all of us are very much concerned, and so far up to now we have been assured by the people of Sudan and the government of Sudan that all the oil facilities are intact and they are not affected up to Port Sudan. Of course, in Port Sudan there is no fighting because there are no forces there. Makuei has no forces there, so there's nothing in Port Sudan. So we hope that nothing affects them. But nevertheless, we have learned from that, and we have now started planning to prepare for any other unforeseen eventualities. One of them is the refinery in Bentiu is actually ready, except that we did not have the route for evacuation of the finished goods. So we are now in the process of setting up the route, connecting it to lakes and to Warab. Once this road is out, then definitely, probably our oil in Tarjad area will be processed immediately and brought to us as finished goods.
So this is the plan now the government is working on?
This is the plan on which we are working now. In addition to that, we are planning, if possible, we will open the Ethiopian Pagag Ethiopia route.
In all this plan, do you have any time frame that when this is going to?
Well, this is the work. It is a technical work, of course, and as such, I cannot say when will it finish. But all the companies are being engaged now to construct the road. This is the most important thing.
Right. Any last message?
Meanwhile, at present, we have also been caught up by rains, and that area is swampy.
Yes.
So we don't know how long will it take them.
Yes. Yeah. Any last message or last remarks you would like to share with the public through iRadio?
Thank you very much, iRadio, and my message to the public is that the government of South Sudan is moving on in the implementation of the agreement, and let me assure the doubting Thomases that elections will be run in time as scheduled. There is no question of delay. We are every now and then we are accused of dragging our feet so that we continue to be in the seats, which is not the case. At present, we are moving very fast. We want to make sure that the agreement is implemented in letter and spirit, and that elections are run in time. So be assured that the electoral process will start in December and end up probably in April.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister, for speaking to iRadio.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you, iRadio.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good.